That's my guess. You can light them up to the
Right.
Multiple times, Ms. Buckley, please call the roll.
Yes, Madam Chair. Councilman Cruz? Councilman Frazier?
Here.
Council President Jordan is not with us. She'll be in later. Councilman Lance? Councilman Mandelbaum will be here shortly. And Council President Pro Tem Seymour.
And, President, did you get everybody?
Yes, you have one. You have 4 members present.
All right, first item, we're going to delay we're going to reverse the order of the first 2 items, and we're going to talk about the donations and sponsorship funds for the purchase of banners, flags, flagpoles, et cetera, for Evergreen Road. Mr. City Manager?
Thank you, Madam President. We're requesting action tonight. This item has been placed on the consent agenda. We're requesting action to proceed to spend $35,000 of funds that have been placed in the Memorial Donation Trust sponsorship account. The last meeting, we showed you some banners, but after learning the time constraints in that, we're going to just simplify this. Michael Manley here, our Community Relations Director, is here to show you the banners that we're going with. Got the board here. We decided at this time to not do any planners. We're just going to keep this simple, the banners and the flags. We're not going to be putting banners. The setup time and the lead time on this is a considerable amount of time, so the more simpler the graphic, easier to proceed.
As the City Administrator has already indicated, the thought is to go ahead with the city's logo treatment in keeping with the city's brand key colors that will feature the Southfield Center of It All logo. As you can see in the mock-up here, that would be the banner, and then here's the mock-up with them on the actual poles. And the thought is also to stagnate these one every other pole, so to keep it consistent but also clean and not to be too distracting for motorists. One of the things we did not want to see is the banners being particularly busy, where it's a distraction for motorists as they're driving down the road, but rather to reinforce the city's brand in a clean, sophisticated way. So the thought is to go ahead and initially launch with these banners, and then we would like to have additional banners that would relate to seasonal themes, as well as promoting city events such as the Martin Luther King Task Force Peace Walk, the city's International Festival, and other signature events such as that. So that's the initial thought, is to launch with the city's branding, and then we'll develop additional banners that will tie into the seasonal theme as well as promotion of events and other activities.
Yes. Is the plan to have the banners on every other pole all the way from 696 all the way to the lodge, or is it going to be compressed?
The thought is between the 2 roundabouts on Evergreen.
Just the 2 roundabouts?
Yes, primarily.
Okay.
Yeah, and then of course there also will be the baskets and the flags, but we didn't want to make it look too busy, so we wanted to have, and there's still, this of course is up to council's consideration, but to have them alternate between the flag on each other pole as well as the basket, so they would have like a staggered look. And we do have other color schemes as well. The city has several brand key colors, and we would like to reinforce the city's branding by using, this is one of the signature colors, is a PMS color, it's that burgundy, and then there's also like a tan color as well that we could do. We can alternate those, again at council's discretion, but the look to keep it clean and sophisticated in keeping with the city's branding.
Okay, now the significant events, do you have any idea how many of those events we're going to have banners for?
Well, there's 2 major ones that the city currently does. We've got the city's signature event really is the cultural event, the International Festival, which will be coming up here shortly, October 10th and 11th. That's here in the Southfield Pavilion. And as well, we've got the annual Dr. Martin Luther King Task Force Peace Walk that's in January. That also takes place in the pavilion. So those are 2 of the main events that the city has, and we would like to promote those. There was some discussion about putting the dates on the banners to help promote it, but then of course you would date them by doing that, and they're rather significant cost investment there. So the thought is just to promote them with the event, so that way without dates, so they can be used year after year without having to reproduce them each year.
Is there any other kind of banner that is under consideration except those signature events and the city logo?
Yeah, additionally, we'd like to look at exploring and developing banners that are seasonal. So in the fall, perhaps like the cornucopia, like fall harvest type thing, as well as, winter, spring, summer. So we'd also like to have seasonal ones, but again, tying into the city's branding and brand key colors, so that all reinforces the city's brand.
Anyone else?
I was just wondering, when you all were looking at these, did you ever consider maybe doing like plants on both sides of one and then 2 flags on the next one as well? I don't know, for me, I don't know, I'm not the person to decorate anything, but I'm just looking at it aesthetically.
Right.
The symmetry seemed like it would be more consistent if the flags and the plants went one after the other.
We did. There was quite a bit of discussion on how to do this to make it look the most aesthetically appealing. So that was discussed, and that's something that we could still certainly do. The big thing is we didn't want it to be distracting, but to look clean, and again, in keeping with the city's brand. But we could certainly alternate them in that fashion. One of the things we didn't necessarily want to see is the example that you have here, where every single pole would have the basket and the flag and the banners. We thought was starting to look a little bit busy. So the thought was to stagnate them every other one. And I think that would be an excellent option to do with why there's just 2 baskets, 2 flags, without banners on that same pole. Absolutely.
Okay. Mr. O'Leary?
Yeah, Mike, what made you create this project?
Pardon?
Why did you do this project?
Well, the new light poles that are already erected do have the banner brackets built in. So it's another way to promote the city through the use of the banners. You'll see a lot of communities do them in a very typical motif. You'll see is the eat, play, shop, those types of things, and we certainly consider that as well. One of the thoughts we had there, though, that's kind of an overused motif. I think you see it in a lot of communities, and we thought to try and do something a little bit different. There's been discussion of having like the Inspiring Words campaign, that you could, again, have different words that, thrive or business, different things that would, reinforce what Southfield is. But, the big thing is we wanted to be consistent with our brand and to reinforce that, but also be aesthetically pleasing without being busy was the thought.
I knew you would make a speech. I knew you would make a speech.
Right.
Anyone else?
No. Going back to Mr. Frazier's question, you mentioned that they're going to be just between 2 roundabouts. Is that to begin with, or is that just the span of the light poles?
Well, certainly initially I think that's the thought, to launch it between the 2 roundabouts. We could certainly expand that, and I think there's been discussion about doing that as well. Again, the overriding concern is to keep it clean and consistent. So, the beauty of the design here, we can alternate this out quite easily. So, and one other consideration too is the maintenance of it. There's obviously staff time involved with the changing of the banners, obviously significant cost involved with the producing of them. So we wanted to keep, the thought in mind was to have something that could be up like at least a quarterly basis without having to swap them out. But the ability to do so as needed and to have in reserves a number of different options at any time that we could use.
What about on Civic Center Drive? Is there any thought to put these flags on Civic Center Drive, even maybe leading into the campus?
I think it's a great consideration, something we could certainly look at.
I have one thought. Taken between the 2 roundabouts, I think it's fine, but when you have like the International Festival, you might want to take up a little bit below, so you have a little broader.
To further promote it?
Special, very special occasion. That would be my hope that you could do that. Anyone else?
One last question. With the flags, has there been any thought, just randomly thinking of, besides for the American flag, but either a state flag or the city flag, to alternate that as well?
There was discussion of that and something we could incorporate. In fact, City Administrator Zorn had suggested for the International Festival we could have different flags of all the countries represented. And as you know, the festival we try and incorporate as many countries as possible to showcase their cultural diversity to the community. So that was a thought that we had discussed as well, that we could showcase for that particular event to have different international flags flying as well.
I think just real quick. I've tried that before with the flags, and as soon as you miss somebody.
That's the problem, yeah.
Councilman
Cruz,
So,
absolutely.
You gotta watch the flag.
Right.
Very true.
Right.
We've encountered that as well. For the festival, we do
Right.
have lining the pavilion, as many of the, different countries' flags as possible. And of course, the one you're missing is the one that the folks are there representing and saying, where's my country's flag? So,
Right.
that is certainly a consideration as well.
You could, if you had the right equipment, just put the flags around the front of the wall. Because there's so many if you want.
Right. Very true.
Terry Crow, you have your...
Yeah, if I could piggyback on two things that, first of all, the poles, the banners, the flags, and the brackets are all designed to be interchangeable, so it gives us a lot of flexibility. We wanted to start simple between the two roundabouts, and we were going to hit the two gateways on the north end and the south end, just a couple light poles with banners, just as entrance. Secondly, we thought we would start simple again with the flags for Veterans Day, Memorial Day, 4th of July, with American flags that could just be put out week before, week after, and then build on that with some other things. City Center, as you may be aware, on Central Park Boulevard, we change ours out four times a year seasonally, and that's something that we hope to build up to. But given that we have a ribbon cutting October 18th or 19th, we wanted to get it started. And as you said, we have that flexibility to do baskets and alternate with flags. The City Center also is going to have a few banners in the gateway just south of 10 Mile in that little median. So those will be changed out seasonally, and then that could be incorporated with the rest of the design. But again, time's ticking, and we'd like your blessing to at least move forward and do it as a trial basis.
Anyone else?
It seems that based on our last discussion, this is a more scaled down project. Does that mean that we don't need to allocate as much money to the project?
We'd like to keep the amount of money within that line item, and as we progress, I'm envisioning that we're going to move something forward for MLK Day, combination design, promoting that. That's one of our annual events. So I'd like to keep it there. There has been some discussion about exploring some holiday lights, but I call it something that I'd like to refer to more as a twilight light, as the year gets really dark, and that mid-December that you keep going until February. And you'll see a lot of your principal shopping districts and other districts use that lighting as a way to offset mood and other issues associated with that. I think some of the terminology they're calling them twilight, or twinkle lights, twilight lights.
Okay.
Anyone else? I think, from my perspective, I think I agree with you. I don't want to look too clever. We have a lot of nice stuff, but we don't want to use it all the time. Right? All right, we'll go on. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you very much. Next item is Comcast Cable Company. Contract for renewal. We're getting the poster. Do you want to do communications? Well, we can do communications. Under communications, we have a request from the town jail. And we have 2 minutes to fill.
Pamela Jarrow, P.O. Box 155, Southfield, Michigan, 48037-0155. My telephone number is 248-346-0439. Amazingly, the person that I was going to address tonight is not here. I want the public and everybody that listens to these meetings via YouTube to know that on September the 17th, this meeting started at about 7:22, which was late. Why was it late? Because on October the 8th, the council president had a fundraiser at Fuddruckers, and she held up the people's business at Fuddruckers for a fundraiser. I don't think the residents appreciate it. I don't think the staff members appreciate it, and I certainly don't appreciate it. Now, you can laugh, Joan Seymour, you can laugh, Mr. Fred Zorn, but I think you both know deep down inside, if you want to be true to yourself, that that's not real leadership. And when you've got a person always talking about business here, city business, and putting me out because I ate white cheddar crackers, that's not a nice thing to do. It's unprofessional, it's inconsiderate, and it's kind of sort of Republican-like. You know, those emergency manager tendencies that I talk about. Because only a person that with that mindset would think to do something like that. So if you think it was fine, then hey, it's okay with me. I just think it's disingenuous. And she will be told that. And that's all I have to say about that. Thank you.
Next we have our
Gerard Mullen.
Mr. Gerard Mullen. And the name and address for the record.
Gerard Mullen, Post Office Box 155, Southfield, Michigan, 48037. I would like to ask this council a question. Why wasn't a public notice for today's added 5 o'clock council meeting posted in accordance with the Open Meetings Act? That is Public Act 267 of 1976, and I quote from the applicable section, Section 5, subsection 3 of the Act. If there is a change in the schedule of regular meetings of a public body, there shall be posted within 3 days after the meeting at which the change is made, a public notice stating the new dates, times, and places of its regular meetings, unquote. This added meeting for today was scheduled at the last council meeting on Tuesday, September the 8th, 2015. This council had then 3 days to post a public notice for this public meeting, but this council failed to do so. Instead, this council posted an agenda, a de facto public notice for this meeting, which was posted on Friday, September the 18th, 2015, 7 days after the 3-day deadline in violation of state law. Also, I have an additional question to ask. How is it possible for someone to sign up to speak during communications at this very meeting? The answer? It isn't possible for most folks. Let me explain. The deadline for signing up for communications for this very meeting was Wednesday, September the 16th, 2015, prior to noon. And the de facto notice was posted on Friday, September the 18th, 2015, 2 days after the sign-up deadline, a true catch-22. There is a simple solution to this dilemma. That is, this council should try to emulate the Oakland County Commissioners' meetings in Pontiac, at the center of it all. In Pontiac, one signs up during the meeting, not 5 days prior to the meeting, to speak during communications. In Pontiac, there is no need for a Pamela Gerald amendment to suppress a free people's right to speak. In Pontiac, there is freedom of speech in Pontiac. Thank you.
So the next item is Comcast Cable Company contract for renewal. Very good. Are you ready?
We're ready. I guess I could start, so, I think council is aware that our current franchise agreement with Comcast expires on September 30th. 2 weeks, less than 2 weeks away. We have met with Comcast. We obviously are back at this issue between the state law and the federal law in terms of a renewal process. We have Joe Van Eaton, who's been in front of council before, and we have Mike Vodka also from the Detroit, a local firm. So if I could turn it over to Joe, kind of tell us where we are, what we've been discussing with Comcast, and are you going to get into the need assessment?
I think I will.
Okay, so I think Joe's probably the best one at this point to make the presentation, and we'll go from there then.
Could you have your name and address?
Sure. My name is Joe Van Eaton. I'm with the law firm of Best and Krieger. I'm in the Washington, D.C. office at 2000 Pennsylvania Avenue, Northwest.
You want to give her a card?
I will give her a card. I don't have it up in my pocket right now, but I'll...
All right, go ahead.
So let me start by going over where you are right now in terms of your franchises, and then talk about how those franchises fit in with a state uniform franchising process, how we do your rights under that process, and what that leads you to in terms of decisions tonight. Basically, right now you have two franchises in the city of Southfield. One with Comcast, the Uniform Modified Franchise Agreement that expires on September 30th of this year. You also have a franchise with AT&T. Both of those franchises provide some significant public benefits to the community. The Comcast franchise, among other things, provides for a 5% franchise fee and 3% of gross revenues. But Comcast also provides other benefits to the city. It picks up your signals for the public education governmental access channels and carries them to their head end. It's been providing and will be continuing to provide an institutional network that's used for a lot of the city's data transport, and will continue to provide that at least through 2019, notwithstanding the expiration of the franchise. On the AT&T side, the franchise provides for a 3.94% PEG fee as well as a 5% franchise fee. So right now, you're getting 3.94% of AT&T's gross revenues to support PEG. You're getting 3% of Comcast benefits, and those are going directly to actually produce a significant amount of public educational and governmental programming. Not just your council meetings, but it's going to the schools, for example, for educational programming, and the schools are engaged in a significant effort to improve the amount of local programming, which becomes more important as we see local broadcasts begin to fade away. Local newspapers have more trouble surviving. So that's what's in your franchises right now. With the impending expiration of the Comcast franchise, we were faced with an interesting situation. As you all know, there is a state law that has something called a Uniform Franchise Agreement. But there's also a federal law that deals with what happens under Renewal. And under the federal law, which Comcast did activate, you're supposed to conduct a needs assessment to assess what you need for the future, what problems you've had in the past, and those are supposed to be addressed in a renewal franchise. So the city, recognizing that there's both a state and a federal process, proceeded with both, which I think is the proper course. One of the results of that is the needs assessment that is before you. And the needs assessment reflects a couple points that I think are significant for the community. One is the need and the continuing need for public educational and governmental access and for significant support for pay. The report basically concludes that the level of support you're getting now or more will be required for the future. Those are the numbers reflected in the report that are based on an analysis with staff as well as meetings with various community groups. The other issue that was examined by the report that's significant, I think, is how is Comcast doing as a provider? Not picking on Comcast, but it's their franchise that was up for renewal. And you'll see that Comcast scored very badly in terms of customer satisfaction and customer service. One of the issues that we face is that there is a set of minimum customer service standards that apply to every cable operator in the country once they've been activated, and they have been activated in Southfield. So in looking at that report concludes that Comcast customer service does not meet federally mandated customer service requirements. So, in looking at it from the federal perspective, we're seeing a need for significant PEG support, as well as some problems with the customer service obligations, issues we're supposed to address in renewal. On the state side, we have a uniform franchise proposal, and Comcast's position is, when we submit the uniform franchise, the terms are governed by state law. They don't have to address customer service issues at all directly. And they don't have to provide the level of support that meets your need. They get to reduce the level of support to 2% of gross revenues, which translates to about $200,000 per year in the city, a little bit more than that, in fact. What makes that even more troubling from your perspective is there's another provision of state law that says you're supposed to charge the same amount to each of the franchise providers. So rather than keeping AT&T at 3.94%, the question will be, does AT&T at some point get to reduce its obligations, which are also worth an additional reduction of its obligations from 3.94 to 2%. And I'm not saying that AT&T would necessarily be able to do that or when that would occur, but that's worth an additional $200,000. So at risk here from accepting the Comcast offer is $400,000 per year for the city over an extended franchise term. So you're talking somewhere in the order of $4 million over a 10-year franchise term. And that's obviously directly reflected in, if you look at the needs assessment, you start saying, okay, so what does that mean folks don't get? Does that mean the schools don't get equipment that the needs assessment report says they need? Does that mean you can't modernize equipment? And there's also some disputes reflected in Comcast offer throughout surrounding state law. You have high-definition equipment, high-definition materials, and as you know from your own experience, the world's moving to high definition. People still get standard definition. You want to still have people who have standard definition be able to see programming, right? So you don't want to just exclusively reach high-definition subscribers, but you can improve the quality of the information you deliver if you send a high-definition signal. Our view was, if we deliver a high-definition signal to Comcast, they need to carry it. Their view is, no, under state law, we can deliver as long as we give you a channel. The quality of the channel is basically our call. So you have some significant issues when you're talking about a 10-year contract term. So as I mentioned, Comcast's view is once they submit that material, we have no choice. We have to basically take it, and that's what state law requires. However, there is a case, or there has been a case, the decision was vacated, but I still think the decision is valid. Mike Watson, who's also here representing, can also speak to the issue, where the Attorney General for the state said, no, the state franchising law has to be read in order to give rise to the Constitution, in order to honor the Constitution of Michigan, which says that local governments are the franchising authority for the state. The state law has to be read to mean that a locality can say no if they get a proposal that's not adequate for their community. So where we are tonight is, and what we do know, though, is that there is in the state law a process and a timeline for action on an application for renewal that's submitted under the Uniform Act. You basically have 15 days after you receive the application to tell the operator whether the application is complete or not, and Southfield has done that. They've sent a notice to Comcast saying the application was complete, and it was. And then there's 30 days to take action on the application. If you fail to act, it's deemed granted. Okay? You can, essentially, by our calculation, the earliest time the 30 days could run would be, I believe, the 28th of this month, based on when the application came in the door. And this is your last meeting before the 28th. So tonight, what you have before you is the application, and the question is, do you grant it, in which case Comcast terms and conditions go into place. You could also insert different terms and conditions, but Comcast would then immediately challenge you at the MPSC. And I think from a legal standpoint, and I believe Mike Watts has shared this view, that's actually the least attractive option. The second thing you can do is do nothing. Let the time pass, in which case Comcast proposal will become the franchise because it will be deemed granted. And the third thing you can do is deny, and essentially provide the reasons for the denial, and explain and essentially proceed down the renewal pathway in that direction. So that's what I would think your options are tonight. It is a practical matter. We have tried to meet with Comcast to see if we could agree to an extension of time for the existing franchise, the extension of time to act on the application. Comcast has indicated they don't want to agree to that, and that's not a criticism of Comcast. That's certainly something they're in a position to say, but it puts you in a position of acting tonight.
Joe, could you go into if there was a denial, what would be the likely outcomes of what would occur after that point?
Sure. I suspect we'd view the appropriate action that would occur then differently than Comcast would. From Comcast's perspective, I think they would want to initiate actions at the Michigan Public Service Commission. And the first action they would have to take would be an informal mediation to see if the parties can resolve matters. And you might be able to resolve things through an informal mediation. If the informal mediation is not successful, the company can file a complaint at the MPSC, and the MPSC then gets to resolve that issue. The problem is the MPSC is not in a position to say cities have a right to say no. That's simply not in their jurisdiction. So from your perspective, what also needs to happen is a court action needs to be filed, where you essentially ask the court to declare that the city had a right to say no, and that would mean, of course, the MPSC has no jurisdiction at all, because the city said no, there's nothing for the MPSC to decide. The MPSC would only be deciding what the terms and conditions of the franchise would be if the city has to accept a uniform franchise. So what that means is, after tonight, both parties will have, if you say no, both parties will have an incentive to take an action either before the Michigan Public Service Commission or you before a court. It doesn't mean you have to run to battle. It doesn't mean you have to immediately go full-fledged into battle. In fact, we've been talking to Comcast about meeting with them as soon as possible to see if we can settle this matter, and perhaps we can do that. But one of the consequences of voting, of denying is both parties will then have an incentive to run to either court or to the MPSC or both fairly quickly. Hopefully, we'll sit down and talk before that occurs, but that becomes unpredictable. So that's where we are. Mike, I don't know if you want to add anything.
No, you've done a good job, Bill.
I think that sort of summarizes where we are. We have prepared a draft resolution, one of which would approve the proposed franchise, and one of which would deny it. And the denial bases we see are, there's actually several. One is based on the customer service. The other is based on the needs assessment and what we view as the needs, and the reduction in the existing support for PEG that would result. There's also the issue I mentioned with respect to the, we think there's an issue with respect to the treatment of the PEG fees themselves. We think state law allows us to use those for operating funds. We haven't been able to get a commitment from Comcast that we can use those for operating purposes, which expands what you can do with the PEG resources. And we also found the need for high-definition channels that I believe we mentioned in the draft resolution. So we've essentially put the issues on the table that are of the most concern based on the needs assessment and tied it to the needs assessment, and that's been resulting in denial. It's also based in part on what federal law requires. One of the problems under the state law, federal law has two different renewal procedures, a very formal process that involves administrative hearings, and an informal process, which is essentially a process through which the parties agree to the terms of renewal franchise. One of the things that federal law says is you can't renew a franchise without having a public hearing where the public has an opportunity to comment meaningfully on the proposal. one of the concerns we have under state law is that if we can't say no, and we have to accept the terms Comcast gives us, we can't give the public a true opportunity to participate. Effectively, it's a done deal under Comcast view of things. So the renewal also raises the question of whether the state law is consistent with the federal law. So that's where we are. I think I can answer any questions anyone has about the process or where we stand.
For the past year, I have called Comcast. I can't get channel 15 steady. It goes on and off, and I'm fed up with it. Nobody there can help us correct it. Why?
I actually don't know the answer to that question, and that's obviously an issue that you hope would be addressed.
One more question. I pay over $90 a month. They claim I have 3 boxes. I only have 2 boxes. I can't prove it to them. I don't have a box. What are they fighting me for? Why am I paying for 3 boxes? Nobody believes. Why don't they believe it?
Yeah. One of the reasons the customer service, one of the things you see in the needs assessment was that the customer service in Southfield, that Comcast got very bad rankings on customer service in Southfield as a general matter. Much worse. And by that, I don't mean everybody hates them. The majority of their customers think, yeah, they're fine. What the consultants who did the report did was they compared the results in Southfield with the results they've gotten from doing surveys like this across the country. And what they're saying is, for whatever reason, they're not seeing the responsiveness or the customer satisfaction in Southfield that they're even seeing in other locations around the country. So it's hard to explain why those things occur. Frankly, we were hoping we could get commitments from Comcast to improve customer service in the city, because it's obviously an issue not just here, but especially here.
Why should I keep paying all that money? If I stop paying, they turn you over for collection or something.
You're absolutely right. That's the problem you're referring to, which is the you can't prove it, is one that's been reported nationally as a problem. I actually personally had that problem because the records weren't accurate, and so I know this is it's a real issue. The only thing I can say is that it's a classic customer service problem that sometimes government's in the best position to
So
address.
I have to pay for it?
No, you shouldn't have to pay for it.
Pay?
Yeah.
If I pay them less, pay. Get a lawsuit.
Yeah. That is an issue that you should be able to address as a customer service issue.
The trouble is they don't believe. The next problem is my son used to work for Comcast, and he knows more than a whole bunch of jerks on the phone now. And they don't know what to tell. We had to start a new program. They don't know how to tell us to work it out. They don't know. My son knows more than they do, but still he doesn't know as much. So I say to hell with it. I can't get Channel 15 know-how. It goes on and off, on and off. I get calls from people while we're meeting. Who should I see? The President of the United States?
Well, one thing you hope is that when these issues come up in a public forum like this, that Comcast will say, we'll look into it and we'll try to address the problem. But the other way to address it, frankly, and that is done elsewhere, is you get commitments as the government, as a regulator from Comcast, that they're going to improve things. And, it can be as simple as an escalation process for handling customer complaints. In other words, you don't want to be stuck with the lowest level employee. You need to have an escalation process, and that's what some communities provide. But that's all an issue that you deal with through the franchising process and through the decisions about whether to renew or not renew.
Well, this keeps up, I'm going to vote against it. Not that you're going to lose it, but I'll vote against it. what do? I'm tired of paying more than $90 a month. What for? To support Robert, the main something or other?
Well, the only thing I can tell you is, if you vote for granting the uniform franchise, the uniform franchise does not have many good enforcement mechanisms for dealing with customer service problems. Your existing franchise does.
So why can't they do something?
It's a fair question.
I'm a good guy about it, I'm paying you.
Yeah.
Only watch channel.
It's not him, this guy's not,
He's
he's not from Comcast.
Well, I want him to go back and tell him.
No, but he's on our side.
Yeah, he's our,
Right.
he's our
Well,
guy.
all right, fight for me, you're on ice.
You know?
Can you do something? Will you do something?
The people who can do something are actually seated around this table. It's in reality. I mean, the right.
They can't do a thing. They can back me up. They can say, since you should have better luck there, who's going to do it? I never cut it out. I tried it. Not tried it. I called AT&T and they were about to put it in. I stopped it. Still, I still got Comcast.
No.
Go ahead, Mr.
Sue, the question I have is that we have both our attorneys here. Is there any benefit to, or can we have a closed session to see what financial alternatives there would be to take a position on either one of these things? I mean, the way it reads here, you have hardly no choice, really. I mean, the choice is to renew the thing, but like I said, I'd like to know, in renewing this negotiated contract, are other things down the road being considered, like the INET and things like that?
Well, I think it's an easy answer. There's really no basis to go into closed session. I mean, this is a franchise agreement that allows an operation such as this is probably as a public thing as you're going to have. I mean, the public has a right to know the parameters and what are the factors in the decision. We know that immediately it's a $200,000 loss annually on the PEG fee. We expect and anticipate that AT&T may come in and make an argument that theirs should then drop down to a level equivalent to Comcast. So if both of those things happen, it would be about $400,000. Looking at the cable budget and kind of seeing how they're funded, could they kind of continue bare bones kind of as they are now? If nothing else happens, they don't need new equipment, schools don't come in for a grant and saying, you know, we've got a new program and we want to offer new equipment for our kids, or one of the colleges here doesn't come in. Those are the things that, if those things occur, you're probably not going to have the funds any longer to do that, because that $400,000 is kind of what's been being used for the major kind of equipment or studio enhancements as we go forward, and you're not going to have that. So that's a real concern, and I think that's where we struggled, even in terms of this whole renewal. The easy route would be to say, okay, state law, we'll take the 2%, and there we go. But the problem is you're going to have ramifications in terms of what you're able to do for the next 10 years. And that may be that the schools won't see any money, and it may mean that as cable needs equipment and as things, you know, become obsolete and there's new technology, we're not going to have the funds to do that. The other piece that I think is significant is what Joe's mentioned, is that the uniform agreement does not take into account the customer service and the satisfaction of the customers. So the federal law, that's a major component, is looking at, if you want to come in and renew your franchise, well, let's see how you've been doing under the old one, and let's see if customers are satisfied and they're getting a good product for their money, and all of that becomes moot essentially under the state law. So where you have an ability to touch that and to make some, address those concerns would be through the federal law, and really the state law. I guess if they're not meeting those thresholds, they're just not meeting them, and so the customer just pays their money and we just continue on.
Yeah.
Mr. Handy made a comment that Comcast, one time or another, did not come to the table.
Well, to be fair,
this is not a negotiation, then.
Well,
it's really,
I think it is. And
respectfully,
I think it is. I think we've indicated to Comcast that, we understand the issues. We understand their position under the state law. I think they understand our position under the federal law. And I think that there would have been an opportunity to really see if we could get together and come up with something that's acceptable. Because anytime you bring, two parties together that understand the consequences on both sides, it seems to me that there could be a middle position and somewhere we could kind of come and resolve this. The problem really has been the timing here, because once this uniform agreement is submitted, it starts that clock. And then when you consider that in conjunction with the city council schedule, it just doesn't leave you any room. We've been talking really the last, week now about some kind of extension. Just hold things as they are. Give us some time without making council make a decision and having a public hearing and potentially hearing, how bad customer service is, and, putting people in a position where to just give some relief to the residents. Council says, we're not just going to do this uniform. We care about our residents. We care about the satisfaction of what they're getting for their money. Just, let's agree to extend where we are for 30 days, 60 days. Let's talk about this and try to find a middle. And Comcast at this juncture has just said that's not something that they're all that interested in at this point. Certainly, I think that we probably will continue to talk with them. I would love to talk with them before we take an action. It seems to me once you take an action, that's kind of set in motion path. And I understand that they will probably take a path to the Public Service Commission. And if that happens, honestly, my recommendation is we need to take a path of our own, and we need to file in federal court. We need to file and be ready to make our constitutional arguments, our arguments that the federal process has priority, and we're going to be in that format. So we'll run off the litigation, and we're going to have to hire lawyers, and they'll have to hire lawyers, and we'll be into this. And I hate to see that happen without the opportunity to really sit and see whether we could find the common ground. But because of the timing...
When is that common ground? When does that discussion take place?
I hope...
Number one, and number two is, what is the council schedule going to do with anything?
Because of the 30 days. Because of the 30 days.
What about the 30 days? You can have a meeting anytime you call a meeting.
I understand that, but we also know that this particular franchise will expire on September 30th.
Yeah.
We also know that our 30 days expires next Monday. So you're right, we could continue to talk for the next couple of days and call a special meeting potentially. That's an option without taking action tonight. But again, trying to fit in with what the normal standard meeting schedule is, that's where we are tonight.
Well, I guess where I'm going with this questions is that we have attorneys that are working ahead of us. And they assume they come to a recommendation to this body, which can either lead us to further discussion or says that this is the way it's got to be, and we'll continue going on. I mean, what do our attorneys and yourself recommend to this body at this particular junction?
And I think this is where it becomes very difficult, because there's no guarantee. I can't pull a court case out and say, if we head off to federal court, there are all these precedential cases that will, we'd prevail, we wouldn't prevail. This would be, because we're different than a lot of states, we have this state law. You know, we don't just have the Federal Cable Act, we have the state law, and it's different in other states because they're not necessarily bound by what the state law is. So we would have to go in and make our argument. Again, if we say that we can live with, at a max, $400,000 less annually in PEG fees, even though we have operations here that are really unlike a lot of channels and a lot of municipalities in the state. We do a lot more with what we have. And we have become used to, we're one of a few communities in the state that has a 3% PEG fee. But that's always been historically recognized because our operations reflect that amount of support from PEG. Because we do something with it. We're not just taking the money and very little programming. We work that. And we are giving to the schools. And we're making sure that, you know, the PEG concept and philosophy is actually put into effect. If we say we can live with $400,000 less, and the schools will suffer, probably our operations will suffer, but if we can live with that, that'll answer the 2% on the PEG, which is what the uniform says. That's the max you can ask for is 2%. Or if we don't want to press the customer service issues, we can agree to the uniform. But we felt that we should be making these arguments, and we should be looking at the residents and saying, you know, if this is the lack of dissatisfaction you have with this company, we should be talking to them about that. And we should be getting some commitments that they're going to do better.
Yeah.
And
I agree. I want to emphasize, I'm not saying we can't reach an agreement with Comcast. I think if we sit down and talk with them, I have some hopes we will be able to reach an agreement on terms going forward. I obviously can't be certain of that. What I do know is if you say yes to the uniform agreement, there's nothing left to discuss. We understand what the consequences are. They're about $400,000 loss in potentially per year. And we also understand you may face situations where Comcast charges you for connections that you now get for free to send PEG signals up. So there's direct financial consequences of saying yes that we can measure. We also, if you say no, while there's the court actions, we know those court actions and the MPSC actions will be far less expensive than the potential loss you're facing. The risk, obviously, is in the litigation. You don't know what the outcome is. But that's a reason why parties, even after they file suit, usually settle. Almost every, you know, you ask lawyers, how many times do you go in for every case you file? You settle before the case ever goes to trial in most cases. And I would hope that would happen here. The good news is you've got an Attorney General's opinion that essentially says you can say no, as I mentioned, and you have two cases out of the Eastern District of Michigan where where the judges have been faced with similar issues to the one raised here, where the cities have prevailed. You're in a very favorable district in terms of the prospects for resolution. But the main thing, what saying no actually does is it opens the door to discussions. Hopefully those can occur as quickly as possible. Hopefully we don't spend too many resources on either side on litigation before you're able to resolve things.
So the recommendation is to say no.
Yeah, I think we've been trying to avoid making a recommendation.
Well, I know that, but I mean, we're sitting here with a lot of money at stake.
Yeah.
Personally, that's what I'm saying. I'd like to know how much money we have on the table, how much we're risking.
that's what
You know, how much can we save in this procedures, because it's limited, of course, but you still have to know risk. And
absolutely.
Just mentioned that you feel pretty comfortable that it's worth taking a risk.
Well, the other thing I would say is that it does, by saying no, I mean, I think we can reasonably anticipate that Comcast will file in the Public Service Commission, which is not the forum that we want to be in. The forum we want to be in, because the Public Service Commission is looking at state law. I want to get us into a forum, and I think Joe and Mike would agree, we need to get into a forum where we can question the whole viability and legitimacy of the state law. So we would need, preemptively, we need to go to federal court. So it may be a dual track. They may be the PSC, we may be in federal court. So, and again, to be fair and make sure that council's aware of everything, the PSC has, you know, monetary power to fine us as well. Fines, again, on the books can go up $20,000. I mean, not saying they would do that, but if they found that we were unreasonable in not signing the uniform agreement, so there's a lot at stake here, but it's how strong do we feel about our ability to deal with the customer service and the fact that we're going to have less PEG money in the future.
And I think that's, the only reason you're not hearing a recommendation from us is because, directly from us, is because the one issue is how important is PEG to you, right? That's one issue, and I can't make that judgment. And I think that's essentially what you're saying. You know what the law says. If it's not that important, then you don't fight about it. The other issue is, do you want to fight about customer service and get some commitments on customer service from this company as part of this? And I think if you feel strongly about customer service, then it leans toward no. Yeah.
I appreciate it, thank you.
All right, would you like to say something? Yeah, okay.
Just very briefly, the penalty provisions probably don't come up in the informal mediation, which was added to the statute a couple years later. And so, although Sue is absolutely correct, let you know about that risk, I would also add that that risk runs both ways. So if Comcast has violated, or found to violate the Act, then they are subject to those penalties as well. And I have not seen those penalties come up in any of the cases so far. So, but it is, you need to be aware of it.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Well, yeah, what I hear, it sounds like we're not discussing raising the bar, we're discussing how low is the bar going to go. Because if we take the agreement, standard agreement, we're going to lose, and I think it's around $400,000 because AT&T's paying us more than 3%.
Right, they're going to go from potentially 3.94 down to 2 points.
That's right.
So it's about a 50% reduction.
Right. So if we figure that losing Comcast pay is $200,000, if AT&T comes down to match that, it's got to be more than $400,000.
It wouldn't, because their revenues are not as high. Their revenues are not as high
Okay.
as Comcast.
All right.
But it's still significant.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Right. And but from my perspective, I think that's really masking what can be the real problem. Because if they're talking about parity, you know, AT&T's PEG philosophy is to have a drop-down menu. And instead of having the three clear channels, they have all of the communities all grouped on drop-down menus. So I could see Comcast saying, well, we're going to go to that. We're going to drop the three individual channels, and we're going to make it parity with AT&T and have drop-down menus, which I think is poor service. And every time AT&T calls me, even though I'm a retiree of AT&T, every time they call me, I tell them, no, I'm not going to buy your service because I'm a one-person holdout. Anybody else, and actually the salespeople don't even know what PEG channel is when I talk to them. I have to explain to them what it is. But I see that. But I also see other things, as far as service is concerned, getting worse if we take the standard agreement. I'm up for saying no, but here's another concern. You want to go to federal court. Comcast probably wants to go to state court. Who's going to make that decision? Which is the court that handles the case?
Oh, it'll definitely be down in federal court. I mean, obviously, I'm going to look to these two, but I would say...
I mean, we'll go.
Yeah, absolutely.
But they might say, wait a minute, you don't belong here, you
Well,
belong
no, if jurisdiction is appropriate, we're there. I mean, we would file the complaint, and we're going to pick the forum, and unless they can come in with some legal basis for why jurisdiction is not appropriate, which at this point I'm not seeing with NP, but...
The Act does not confer exclusive jurisdiction with the PSC, but because the PSC is generally pretty friendly to the industry, whether it's energy or telecom or cable, if I was Comcast, that's where I'd want to be. We want to be a federal court for several reasons, and Sue's talked about those, and so has Joe, and that is the PSC is not going to look past the statute. They're just going to interpret those words as they're written as best they can. So we can't raise our Michigan constitutional rights, your home rule rights, and so on. And we can't raise the federal law in any substantive way. So we have to be in a forum where we can do that, because that's our argument. And Detroit, Dearborn, Warren, Woodfield Township, and Meridian have all raised these kinds of issues with this statute for many of the reasons that you're sitting here talking about today. And we've been successful. And then we've worked out agreements afterward. But, you know, it's almost if you're not willing to push the issue, then you get left with what...
Sure. If you roll over play dead, you get what you get.
Pretty much.
And I think Comcast was fairly clear to me anyhow, when they were going to buy out Warner.
Yeah, when they were going to merge?
Yes. They cut that swath right down the center of the country.
Mm-hmm.
It says, we don't want you guys, we'll take the high-priced people on both coasts, and the center of the country, we'll leave that up to, you know, the local folks. And so that told me right now, we don't mean as much to Comcast in this area as the people on the coasts. So, again, that says to me, we're lowering the bar, or Comcast is trying to lower the bar, and we're trying to do everything we can to keep the bar as high as possible. So, my vote is to, let's say no. That's it.
Yeah, I guess I'm a little bit confused based upon our president's meeting on Thursday. I think
we started, the only thing is we looked at the numbers, talked to the cable department. They feel that, you know, these dollars are important. And to just, you know, agree to take what the state law allows without even having the opportunity to continue the dialogue, to see if we're able to really show what these dollars are and why they're important and just give up on them. I think that the cable department is feeling that, at least in their sense, in their view of things, that's just not a road that's necessarily something that they, if they had their way, that's not how they would see this thing going. They would like to at least take on an opportunity to show why those dollars matter and what they do with them. So, again, we were under the impression that the loss to the city was a couple $100,000. Really, when you put those significant AT&T dollars in, it is a $400,000 risk to the city annually, and what the peg fees are.
So, with the agreement expiring on the 30th, that discussion is probably not going to take place.
Well, and this is what we were trying to do. We've been trying to talk in the last week about just some kind of extension. Let's not take an action here. If there is a middle ground and we could sit and we could work this out, if both sides are willing to and are reasonable, maybe we could work it out. Let's just get an extension of where we are right now. And right now, Comcast is not interested in doing that. They feel that there's a time parameters set forth in the state law. We're in those time parameters, and they expect us to act within that time. So this is the meeting at which we would either take some type of action, or that 30 days is going to expire, and we will have been deemed to have approved the uniform agreement. So without Comcast saying we'll extend those deadlines, we really don't have much choice.
Is there history on other cities that have had, and I know we're pretty unique, the 3% pay that have gone against signing?
No, I think a lot. We're one of the first that are going into the renewals. I mean, you know, there isn't. I mean, you know, other cities have been into this issue of the state versus the federal law, and they've been on other issues. But I mean, I know that there are some with 3%. I think we're only one of 3 or 4 in the whole state that has the 3% pay, and I think that's probably a factor here. Is that yeah, we have a higher peg than probably most communities, but we do so much with that peg that it's you know, other cities maybe don't have the programming, or don't have the expensive cable operations that we do, and don't use it for the educational piece like we do. So it's significant to the cable department. $400,000 probably means when the schools come to the city and say, we'd like to an equipment grant of $200,000 because we want to put cameras in an academy for people to learn how to do communications, and that's where they're interested, then we may be in a position to say, we'd love to do it, but we don't have the PEG dollars anymore, and so we're not able to do that. Or if one of the colleges came and said, we'd like to do something, do you have any PEG money that would assist in that? Those dollars have now shrunk, and we'll have very little money over and above just kind of keeping our operations the way they are to do anything. And again, if council's okay with that, if living with the operations that we have now and not having money for schools or for additional studio enhancements or equipment enhancements, then you know, it at least addresses that piece of it, the 2%. Doesn't deal with the customer service, but it would deal with that. We could probably maintain our cable operations the way they are with the 2%, if they both went to 2%, but we would be about keeping even.
Because the flip side, you have to look at the count rate.
You're right. But at $400,000 a year, there is enough risking over the next 10 years that, you know, I think you do start to say that legal fees at this point might make some sense. It certainly, if it was $400,000 total, I guess I'd have a problem with that. But you are looking at a 10-year franchise at $400,000 a year. That's $4 million. So do we, and again, it really does come down to dollars. I mean, that's why I think this has been difficult, because obviously if the loss of the PEG money had resulted in like a decimation of our whole cable operations, like we just couldn't function anymore, that would have made this easy as well. We can probably still, again, keep our head above water, but barely. And we won't have the money to do the things like, a new technology comes out, and it's a big investment. Well, we're not going to be able to take advantage of that, because we won't have those funds that we can now put into that. Or the schools, or, something else that comes that would be really beneficial for the community. We're just not going to have it anymore. And the needs assessment was pretty clear that we need every dime. The community needs every dime of what you're getting right now, and maybe more. So this is a tough one. This is a tough one. I mean, the easy answer again would be just let the state law, if they've submitted it, and go with it. But I do think that there is this argument that we are now dropping what our level of expectation is. And ours in cable has always been higher, always. We have been a community that said, we do more with our cable dollars, and, we have more programming, and so we have a certain need, and that's where it always justified the 3%. And that was always recognized by going back to Continental Cablevision. They recognized that we were doing something with it, and what we were doing was for the community. And so, historically, again, we had no problem with getting the 3% because it was justified. And now under the state law, that's at least an issue, whether it could just be taken away. And certainly, having gotten to a point where we have a certain expectation, a certain level of what we do with PEG, and now have that reduced by $400,000, that's a significant hit. Very significant.
With that reduction in PEG fees result in a reduction of the customers' bills at all? Like what they pay a month?
Well, it's a pass-through. It's a pass-through. So if it went down to 2% from the 3% where it is right now, the customer would see that 1% difference on their bill because it's pass-through. It won't be a lot. It won't be a lot. Average customer bill is what, maybe?
Even if someone's $100, that 1% is $1.
Yeah, not a lot.
And why hasn't AT&T already gone down to 3%? If you're assuming that they're going to reduce theirs down to 2% after this happens with Comcast, why haven't they done it prior to that?
Because that number was actually negotiated with AT&T because they came in the middle kind of the existing Comcast franchise. And within the existing Comcast franchise, there had been some equipment grants, there had been the iNet. So those things were not actual dollars, but they were things that Comcast had provided at their cost. So what happened is we dollarized the value of that and said to have Comcast and AT&T be on the level playing field. AT&T, you need to pay the 3.94. Comcast, you have to pay and you continue to pay the 3. So it was a way to make them equal. Exactly. Anyone else?
What happens if we choose one route and say no to this agreement? October 1st comes around. What happens to either the service or the fees? I mean, I'm assuming Comcast isn't going to shut service off to people if they don't have a franchise agreement. But I mean, is that a potential scenario?
Can we go through that, Tony?
Well, it's interesting. The one case that's dealt with this says that after the franchise expires, without your consent for them to continue, Comcast becomes a trespasser, and so they can continue providing service. I've never known them to shut off service, but they may be subject to action as a trespasser. We are going to discuss, and I would hope to discuss with Comcast, whether there's some way the city can agree to the continuation of service while they are continuing to provide service under the old franchise, paying all the fees. What I would like to know, and where we're sort of, that's something that I think we can discuss over the next few days. One of the things we'd like is obviously, if we're going to have peace for a little while, let's have at least a little time to discuss things before we go running off and starting to spend money on lawyers in courts or at the MPSC. So that's something that's an option we'll talk about.
It's a good question. It puts Comcast at some significant risk because they're only here if they have a franchise.
So then, there's two fees that Comcast charges. You have the franchise fee and you have the PEG fee. Is the main issue the PEG fee?
Yes.
Yeah.
And then if that fee is really a pass-through, what's the big deal?
You mean for Comcast?
Correct.
Yeah, I don't know. They're here. You can ask them. I don't get it myself. What is the point? I suppose competitiveness with others but AT&T, you already heard, is paying more.
And 3% on even like a $100 bill, or I know, you're talking, pennies.
Right. Well, I don't want to speak for Comcast. There are national,
right.
Just like what you're facing is something that others have bitten a piece off of because they weren't going to tolerate that kind of treatment. And when they stood up and fought, or didn't roll over and play dead, as somebody said, we reached an accord. But you can't reach an accord if you aren't willing to push the envelope.
But they're not fighting the franchise fee at all.
No, that's federal and state. It's the same.
It's 5%. That's 5%. That's what they propose. They're not proposing to reduce it. We're proposing. We are actually built into the existing Uniform Act. We've got a 5% franchise fee paid pursuant to a state law definition, which we've accepted. So there's actually no dispute on that portion of the dollar issue.
And Sue's correct. There is a provision in the PA 480 that talks about 2% as a cap. There are other provisions. I mean, this goes on forever. But there are other provisions that suggest maybe what you're paying now, the 3%, maybe that is appropriate because it's been agreed to. And then you can certainly agree to whatever you can all agree to. That's real clear under the Act.
So there is the option that if we say no to the agreement and nothing is worked out by October 1st, we're almost saying to Comcast, let's see, try to pull out of Southfield and deal with that PR.
I don't think they're good. I think
they'd pull out, but I'm saying that.
And I don't even think I'm not speaking for Comcast. I don't think they see it that way. I think they see it as their right under state law is to a 2% PEG fee. We contend we can have more, and if we can't, we can say no. But I think they just view it as a situation where the parties ought to figure out a way to resolve their rights by coming to an agreement.
I have a question to the manager. Would this situation, one way or the other, if we go for it, would it have a negative impact on what we're hoping to do with our business community and the terms of that community? And what is this all about, just residential? Would it negatively impact what we're hoping to do with our residential?
cable is part of how we communicate our public relations component with our residents as well as our business community. We'll continue to do that. At the end of the day, we will live within the means we have. I'll remind council, I have a very creative group managing our cable. They would love to see a lot more resources. And if you'll recall, in this current budget, we did add to personnel. We would continue, we'll live within our means, whatever level of funding we get. We'll, possibly have to alter our service delivery model, perhaps more non-careers. And, it's always nice to have full-time employees, but full-time employees come with a 50% fringe benefit rate. So we might have to shake some things up, but we'll continue to use it to promote the community for our business development activities as well as quality of life for our residents.
Well, but the residents come first because they're paying directly, but in terms of our overall communication with the business community, what we're trying to do for the future, we just have a negative.
Well, there's a lot more we would like to do. It always comes down to economics.
Right.
If we lose 400,000, 200,000 a year, that's less we have to deal with.
Yeah.
What's your recommendation?
Right now, we can survive this loss based on the model, but we're a lot fewer employees than we were in 2008. 2008, we had a lot more full-time employees. As part of the attrition that happened through the community, we did not replace a number, but only this year recently, we did bring on 2 new people to fill some of those gaps. So, I know Lisa Hawkins, our manager, she's got great ideas, love to do more, but again, I've got a finite amount of money to deal with. We've got constraints within the collective bargaining agreement that we have to recognize as well. But my message is we'll live within the means we have, and our product is so much superior than our peers. They don't have cable studios and all of that. And I do think it's a great resource to message our vision for the community.
So in terms of what's your recommendation?
My recommendation is that staff, kind of after hearing the city attorney, the meeting is that we continue to negotiate, but that perhaps the resolution is that if we don't have an agreement by September 30th, we're prepared to tell Comcast no. And which would mean, come on, 1st of October, the next meeting, we'd be gearing up for a legal fight in federal court.
Yeah, one of the things that we need to really think about is, we keep saying, yeah, we can lose the $200,000, we can make ends meet. We aren't going to be able to do this. We have to think down the road. We have to think at the end of the next contract period, which is 10 years down the road. What is the technology going to be doing for the people? And if we short ourselves on this end, we aren't going to be able to keep up with it. And right now, we've got studios and other communities don't. But if we can't supplement the money to stay ahead, we're going to start to deteriorate what our residents and businesses expect. And I still say the big fee is sort of masking what I think could eventually be the real problem. And that is, if today Comcast says, if there's a problem, we'll give you a 4-hour window. There's no reason, if we don't have any muscle at all, for them to say it's going to be an 8-hour window. We'll be out, if your TV or your internet breaks down, we'll only guarantee that we'll be out here sometime in the next 8 hours, which means that people have to lose a whole day's work. So it could have a real negative effect as we go down the road. So I think we need to, and when I said vote no, I'm all for trying to negotiate. But if it gets right down to it, I say let's go to court. And one other last question, and Mr. Malabon brought up something that kind of ticked something in my mind, not picked me up. But if there's not an agreement on October 1st, can they invoke the fact that, well, they didn't agree to anything, so we'll just go with the one where they, where we don't say anything for 30 days? The time was run out.
That would be the essence of their position. Their position would be, you had to approve it within 30 days, you didn't approve it within 30 days, therefore, it's approved on the terms they proposed.
Yeah, but you don't have the right, on the state law, they would say, I would imagine, you don't have the right to reject it.
Yeah.
And we would say, well, under the federal law, we do, and the Attorney General seemed to suggest that you could, and so we battled that back and forth.
Yeah. So even if we were knocking on their door and we could see the curtains fluttering so we knew somebody was in there, and he wouldn't come to the door to talk with us, they could say, we get to make the decision.
Yes, and we can also, we also do have an option, I'm sort of hearing it from around the table, that we, as part of the resolution, you could say if they came in with an extension of the existing franchise, we'd be okay. And they could accept that as part of the...
Sure, while we're talking.
Yeah, yeah, I mean, we could say that, we could add that to the resolution as before you truly.
I think that's in there.
Okay,
that
good.
the administrator can authorize an extension of the current terms if we're talking.
Good.
And remember, we're going to have the public hearing in the regular, so that would be, after that would be the point that you actually make a decision.
So we don't need to do anything else?
You really don't.
Okay.
You really don't, because the public hearing is scheduled.
Okay.
So
we'll reserve that. All right, I need a motion to adjourn. Is Comcast representative?
Stand back here.
Yes, I am.
Yes,
I would.
Somewhere there.
Thank you.
You needed to be ready for the party.
Well, we're ready.
Oh, we want to meet you.
Hi, Mayor, and thank you for this opportunity to speak to you. I have met you before. Certainly. My name is Leslie Bogan. I work for Comcast. My business address is 1401 East Miller Road in Lansing. Thank you. So I have addressed this group before, and I've met with almost all of you separately over a period of time. Thank you again for letting me speak. I was trying to take notes. There are so many issues I would like to address that were brought up. I don't know if I'll remember them all. Please give me a little leeway if it's a little discombobulated, but we do appreciate you as our customers. And I don't know why there has not been a resolution in your particular issue or others that are around. But let me tell you, we do have a process for escalated customer issues here in Southfield. And that is to go through your cable administrator, who then has gone through our government affairs person to reach resolution. So that process has been ongoing for quite a while. And anybody that has an issue with the city, who comes to the city, should be able to avail themselves of that process. So before we leave tonight, we will, I'll take down whatever information I need, and we'll see that. Let me address customer service, because I hear what you're saying, and it's no secret that customer service has not been our best customer product. Okay, we know that. But it's also no secret all of the efforts and the pronouncements that Comcast has made to turn that around. Okay, it starts with things like, we're talking about an on-time guarantee. So we have now 2-hour windows. And if a technician is not able to make it within those 2 hours, it's an automatic $20 credit. It used to be you called in and you gave the particulars and you credit. It's automatic now. But we're also trialing something, which hopefully will come to this area soon, and it's all through apps on your smartphones or your iPads or your computers, where through the app you will be able to see The technician that has been assigned to your service, you will see a picture of that technician, and in real live time, you will be able to see when that technician will reach you. This is one of our customer experience enhancements that we're very committed to. We've committed to hiring over 5,000 more customer care executives around the country. We are committed to trying to simplify customers' bills. We just entered into, a few months ago, an agreement with UPS whereby any Comcast customer can take equipment to a UPS store. You don't have to box it, you don't have to wrap it, you just give it to them, you will get a receipt, and they will take care of sending it to us. And there are many, many more initiatives coming down the pipe because our CEO has said they want to make customer service our #1 product. So I want to bring this up to you, too, because regulation, franchise obligations are not the only way that things get done in any business, but cable, too. Competition is. We know we have to fight for your service. The question came up about, well, what difference does it make if it's a pass-through? We know that people will opt for another service for much less money than that. And, for instance, in our marketplace, we compete against providers that don't charge any franchise fee or don't charge any PEG fee, and that's our satellite competitors. And that is probably our largest competitor. So there are all of these kinds of marketplace issues that do affect what customers are willing to spend. But we are committed to improving the customer service and to keep on improving, right? I also want to mention to you that, we are willing, we are still willing to talk with the city, and we have said that over and over. But we have a state franchising process, and that process has a form that we did not create, the state created, and we live with. And this form was sent to the city, and we believe that the best thing for both parties is to just proceed with the timing. Because what will happen is if we need to go to a mediation, we can do that relatively inexpensively, but it is also flexible. So you file an informal mediation complaint at the MPSC, and you have many days to meet, both parties to meet. You can meet separately with each other, you can meet in front of somebody from the PSC, but you have at least 30 to 60 days to try to come to an understanding. And we are very open to that. We just would like the process to keep going. What you've heard here tonight is that the attorneys have expressed opposition to wording in the state franchise. Comcast did not put that there. We are under an obligation to proceed under state law. Every other community that I have dealt with to date has understood that when competition of this nature came in, regulation was scaled back by the state legislature, and there are many benefits to that, even though you might not get to be as heavily regulatory. So much has happened, investment-wise, technology-wise, since this law, that it's beyond whatever the regulations were. The state law still requires all cable operators to follow FCC service standards. So the fact that it's been portrayed here that there's no more standards is not true. Plus the fact, when we were here before you with the transfer, which hopefully you're glad didn't go through, because we're still here and we still want to be here and investing, there was discussion about this, and there was an acknowledgement by the city that there were no alleged complaints or violations at that point, and that was just a year ago. We look at the needs assessment, we're not where we would like to be as far as numbers, but I think you were led to believe that most people are very unhappy. Well, an overwhelming majority of people are not. That doesn't mean there's not room for more improvement, so please don't misconstrue what I'm saying. But in that regard, we're putting forth full effort. we're talking about $200,000 and $400,000. We really cannot embrace what any other cable operator has voluntarily agreed to with the city. The law is pretty clear that the incumbent sets the bar, and yes, there is a movement if two parties want to voluntarily do it, but it doesn't impact, the voluntary aspect doesn't impact the other provider. What does impact the other provider is that the obligations and burdens are the same. And so, here you have awarded another franchise to AT&T. They voluntarily agreed to a higher peg fee, but I don't think they had any other conditions placed upon them. So, I'm sure I missed a lot of points, and they're all on the floor with my notes. But I'm sure I missed a lot of other points that you brought up. I would address anything that you wanted to. We are willing to work with the city. We do feel that, we'll be able to go forward and do that. We hope you won't reject. We hope you won't reject the franchise. Neither party wants to look down the road of long litigation, but we understand that the city has to do what it feels is lawful and, for the state law. I think I'll stop at that point and see if there's any questions that I might answer.
Yeah, one of the things is Comcast recently just improved the bandwidth.
Yes.
And yet, when I listen to conversations, other countries have much greater bandwidth than the United States has, so it's almost like our internet companies are suppressing the bandwidth for some reason. Is there a reason that it's not even, the bandwidth is not even greater so that the downloads, uploads are done quicker?
I'll tell you, we're working on it. We are working on it. All the time we're getting technology that is increasing our plant, increasing, there are lots of different techniques, I don't think they call it techniques in technology world, but I do, that will get better use, greater compression without losing quality, and we're really working on that. And one of the things we have done, and thank you for bringing that up, is increase bandwidth speeds at no extra cost as much as we can. And we are looking at even more technology to do that. I don't have a very scholarly answer for that question, but I can certainly get back with you and see how best to address that.
Well, the best answer is to just do it.
We are. Well, we are doing it. We definitely are, because we know that's important to our customers. Yeah.
Sure. Okay. Thank you.
Is Southfield the only community with 3% pay that's left?
Every other
out there?
Every other community has agreed to the 2% cap in state.
Were there other communities that had the 3%?
Yes, there were.
Essentially?
All of them. Yes. Yes. And so you're not at the tail end. Believe me, you are not at the tail end of renewal. You are. There's way more that have renewed than that are coming up. With Comcast. I can only speak with Comcast.
I guess that's it. Anyone else? We are adjourned.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Okay.